High in the silent, snow-capped mountains of Georgia, where fog clings to the earth like a secret, there exists a place untouched by time. Hidden beyond winding trails and thick forests lies a village so remote, no road signs lead to it, and no satellite images have ever clearly revealed its location. The villagers call it Vashlovani, though no official records recognize the name. Here, technology has no foothold. There are no cell towers, no internet, and no rush of modern life. Only the rhythm of nature, steady and eternal. In this forgotten place, the air feels different, crisp, rich, and alive. The villagers speak a dialect so ancient that even regional scholars struggle to understand it fully. They grow their own food, harvest mountain herbs, and drink from glacial streams that run so pure, they sparkle even under moonlight. Life in Vashlovani is simple, but there is something extraordinary about it. Almost everyone here lives past 100. It is not uncommon to see a 98-year-old woman baking bread, or a 102-year-old man tending goats up a steep cliffside. Wrinkles mark their skin, but their eyes hold the clarity and strength of someone half their age. At the center of this enigma was a man known only as Georgi Tsereteli. No one in the village remembered a time before Georgi. According to local legend, he had been there when the village was founded, over a century ago. His house, built from heavy stone and thick cedar, stood at the edge of a dense forest. Georgi was thin, but strong, with hands like tree roots and a spine as straight as an arrow. Every morning, just as the sun touched the tips of the peaks, he walked down to the icy river, bathed, and drank deeply from its waters. He spoke little, worked much, and ate modestly. Yet the most astonishing thing about him was his age. Local records, though sparse and often inconsistent, placed his birth in 1801. If true, that would make him well over 120 years old. Some villagers swore he was even older. He had outlived his children, grandchildren, and even great-grandchildren. Visitors from nearby towns came seeking a glimpse of him, some calling him a miracle, others whispering about curses or divine protection. But Georgi never paid attention to the attention. He lived as he always had, quietly, purposefully, and apart from the noise of curiosity. The few outsiders who tried to talk with him often left frustrated, as he answered questions with long silences and cryptic phrases. Still, those who stayed longer often described feeling changed, as though just being near him made the world slow down and feel more real. Whispers began spreading in academic circles and scientific communities. Could Georgi be the oldest living human on Earth? And if so, how? A team of curious researchers set out to find the truth. But they didn't know that this village, and the man they hoped to study, held a secret that would defy everything they thought they knew about time, life, and death. The researchers arrived in Vashlovani with notebooks, cameras, and equipment, ready to uncover the truth behind the village's strange longevity. Their journey had not been easy. The road leading to the mountain had turned to gravel, then to dirt, and finally vanished altogether. They had to hike the final stretch, their boots sinking into wet moss, their breath short in the thinning air. The village finally appeared through the fog like something out of a forgotten legend. Stone cottages with moss-covered roofs, small gardens lined with herbs, and smoke curling from ancient chimneys. At first, the villagers kept their distance. They watched the strangers with quiet eyes, suspicious, but not hostile. The researchers were careful, respectful. They offered bread, helped carry firewood, and listened more than they spoke. Slowly, the walls began to lower. One by one, the villagers opened their homes, shared their meals, and told their stories. They revealed their ages, shocking numbers, confirmed by old worn family records passed down through generations. These people were not just living longer, they were thriving. But all conversations eventually led to one name, Giorgi Tsereteli. Though he rarely spoke, everyone saw him as the guardian of the village's secret. "He is not just old," one villager whispered. "He is timeless." His stone house stood at the edge of the woods, half covered in ivy, its door always closed. Every day at sunrise he could be seen walking along the same path to the river, moving with quiet purpose, as if following a ritual older than memory. One afternoon, one of the researchers was invited inside Giorgi's home. The interior was simple, no electric lights, only candles, shelves filled with dried herbs, and a fireplace that never seemed to go out. But what caught the researcher's attention was a large wooden chest sitting in the corner, bound in rusted iron and sealed with a heavy lock. It was old, too old for its wood to remain intact, yet it did. Giorgi noticed the researcher staring at it. He didn't speak, only walked over, tapped the lid twice with his knuckles, and returned to his chair by the fire. There was something final in that gesture, something that said, "You may look, but not yet." That night, a storm rolled through the mountains. Thunder cracked above the village, and winds howled like ancient spirits. In the morning, Giorgi was gone. His bed was made, his boots by the door, his coat hanging on its hook. No one had seen him leave. There were no footprints in the mud outside his home, no trail through the forest. It was as if he had vanished into the air. The researchers, now deeply invested, asked the elders for permission to examine Giorgi's house. With heavy hearts, they agreed. Inside, everything remained undisturbed, except the chest. The lock was still in place, but something felt different, as if the air around it pulsed with hidden energy. Eventually, they broke it open. Inside, they found things that defied explanation. Scrolls made of animal skin, small glass bottles filled with dried roots and herbs unknown to modern science, and a faded leather-bound book titled The Code of Breath. It was the beginning of something none of them could yet understand, a discovery that would change everything they believed about aging, nature, and the thin line between myth and truth. The leather-bound book titled The Code of Breath felt heavier than it looked, as if it carried more than just pages, perhaps the weight of centuries. Its cover was cracked and dry, the stitching frayed with age, yet the ink inside remained legible. The writing was in an old form of Georgian mixed with symbols that none of the researchers immediately recognized. One of them, an expert in ancient scripts, noted similarities with early Vedic Sanskrit and obscure Himalayan dialects. This was no ordinary village diary. It was a manual, a guide, maybe even a warning. The book was divided into 12 chapters, each one outlining a way of life that seemed more spiritual than scientific. The first spoke of breath, not as a function of survival, but as a tool for transformation. It described long-forgotten breathing patterns said to sync the body with the Earth's magnetic pulse. Another chapter focused on stillness, encouraging daily hours of complete silence and motionlessness to allow the body to hear the instructions of time. A section on diet mentioned not just what to eat, but when and how. Foods to be picked before dawn, roots harvested only during full moons, and water that must sit in moonlight for 3 nights before drinking. Then came the passages on the herbs. The researchers immediately turned to the bottles found inside the chest. Each was sealed with wax and labeled with faint markings. Their contents included dried leaves, red fibers, powdered bark, and what looked like a tiny white fungus. Tests conducted later would show that some of these plants contained unique alkaloids and enzymes never before catalogued, substances that appeared to slow down cellular aging
and reduce inflammation to near-zero levels. One particular compound even stimulated natural telomere repair, something science had only recently begun to understand. The book made it clear that the herbs alone were not the key. In fact, it warned that without mastering the breath and stillness first, the plants would lock the body in time but not the mind, causing imbalance. One passage stood out. "He who swallows the root of the frozen dawn without the rhythm of breath shall see years without peace." It sent a chill through the room. This wasn't just about living longer. It was about living rightly. The deeper the team dug into the book, the more they began to suspect that Georgie had not simply aged slowly. He had stepped outside the normal process of aging altogether. He had created, or perhaps inherited, a way to tune himself with nature so precisely that his body resisted decay. It was not immortality but something stranger. Longevity with balance, aging that obeyed the will of the mind. However, not everything in the book was understandable. Some pages were intentionally smudged. Others had symbols that none of the linguists could decode. There were also references to a ritual only performed once every 50 years, under a sky with no stars. What it meant remained unclear. One researcher proposed publishing the book immediately. Another warned against it. The knowledge felt sacred, perhaps even dangerous. They had uncovered something ancient and powerful. But had they earned the right to use it? And, as they would soon discover, they were not the only ones interested in unlocking its secrets. As the researchers pored over the code of breath and continued their tests on the herbs, strange occurrences began to unfold in the village. It was subtle at first. The air felt charged like before a storm. The animals, usually calm and docile, became restless. Sheep paced nervously in their pens, while the birds in the trees seemed to be agitated, calling out in rapid, erratic bursts. The villagers who had once been calm and reserved began to whisper among themselves. There was a sense of unease in the air. Something they feared had been disturbed. The sense of mystery deepened when a group of well-dressed strangers arrived in the village. They were not scientists or researchers. They came in sleek black cars, their presence starkly different from the simplicity of the village. At first, the villagers assumed they were tourists, though the visitors did not fit the typical profile. Their clothes were pristine, their smiles cold and professional. They introduced themselves as government agents, representatives from a special health division, and claimed they were there to assist the village by studying the extraordinary longevity of its people. The researchers, still focused on their work, greeted the strangers with skepticism. Their suspicions grew when these newcomers began asking, not about the herbs or the breathing techniques, but about Georgie Tsereteli. They wanted to know where he was and when he might return. The villagers were equally evasive, offering only vague replies. Georgie had disappeared, they said, and no one had seen him since the storm. Despite their questions, the visitors didn't seem interested in any of the traditional aspects of the village Ares way of life. Instead, they turned their attention to the researchers. They asked about their findings, about the plants, the breathing methods, and the ancient book. The tone of their inquiries shifted quickly from polite curiosity to veiled pressure. One of the researchers, a woman named Dr. Eva Petrova, felt uncomfortable when one of the strangers suggested they could speed up the analysis of the herbs, possibly even mass-produce them for global distribution. The idea of monetizing the village's knowledge seemed to sicken her. A few days later, the visitors left, but the sense of unease lingered. The villagers noticed that the weather had begun to change. The once pure waters of the river had taken on a strange color, a murky, reddish tint. The fish, which had always thrived in the stream, began to die in large numbers. Trees started to wither, and the air felt unnaturally heavy, as if the mountains themselves were holding their breath. The researchers, despite their growing apprehension, continued their studies. But one by one, they began to experience disturbing things. A researcher named Thomas Wilkes, who had been working late into the night, was found unconscious in the woods the next morning, with no memory of how he had gotten there. Another, Dr. Arun Patel, reported strange visions in his dreams in which Georgie appeared to him, warning him to leave the village before it was too late. The final blow came when one of the researchers, Sarah Lowell, vanished without a trace. She had been last seen near the chest, still studying the ancient book. When a search party was formed, nothing was found. No sign of struggle, no trail leading away. She had simply disappeared. The villagers spoke in hushed tones, but their faces said everything. Something had gone wrong, and they feared it was tied to the book, to the herbs, and to Georgie's secret. The remaining researchers were shaken. They had come to uncover a mystery, but now they realized that they had unearthed something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. The ancient wisdom, the secrets of the breath, the strange herbs, all of it felt like a power that was never meant to be tampered with. They couldn't shake the feeling that they had been watched from the moment they arrived, as if something far older than they could comprehend had taken notice of their intrusion. Soon after Sarah's disappearance, a shadow fell over the village. A new group arrived, this time with official-looking documents and the promise of funding. They were not there to learn, but to take control. They spoke of preserving the knowledge for the good of humanity, but the researchers, now frightened, knew this wasn't about preservation. It was about exploitation. They had uncovered the secret to a longer life, but they were not the first to seek it. And as the village grew increasingly unstable, the truth became clear. Some secrets, once revealed, could never be contained.
As the village of Vashlavani descended deeper into unrest, the remaining researchers began to realize they were facing something beyond their control. The air, once pure and invigorating, now carried a faint metallic tang, as if the mountains themselves had begun to deteriorate. The river's once crystal waters, which had sustained the villages for generations, now ran thick and sluggish, as though the very flow of life was being choked. The animals that had lived harmoniously with the villagers had become restless, attacking each other, as if some unseen force had tipped the balance. The night Sarah Lowell disappeared, a sense of finality settled over the group. Her absence wasn't just a tragic mystery. It felt like a warning. The remaining researchers gathered in a hastily assembled meeting to discuss their next steps. They were torn. On one hand, they had come to uncover the secrets of the village, but on the other, they now found themselves entangled in something far too dangerous to study. Their first instinct was to leave. But when they went to the village elders for advice, they were met with grim silence. The villagers no longer trusted them, or anyone from the outside. Some had already started to pack their belongings, preparing to leave before whatever curse had been unleashed consumed them all. But the researchers knew that they couldn't just walk away, not without answers, not without understanding what had gone wrong. In the days that followed, strange things continued to happen. The remaining members of the team experienced vivid dreams that seemed to blur the lines between past, present, and future. In one such dream, Dr. Eva Petrova found herself standing before Georgie in a field of flowers. He was younger, vibrant, and looked at her with knowing eyes. "You should have left," he whispered, his voice faint but clear. When Eva woke up, her hands were shaking, and she couldn't shake the feeling that the dream was a warning, something more than just a figment of her imagination. The situation reached its peak when the last batch of herbs they had sent to the lab for analysis came back with shocking results. The compounds in the plants weren't just slowing down aging. They were altering the fundamental makeup of human cells. accelerating regeneration, but at a terrible cost. The tests revealed an alarming side effect. Prolonged exposure to the plant's essence caused the brain to deteriorate, leading to madness and complete disconnection from reality. The herbs were, in fact, prolonging life, but at the cost of sanity. By then, the government agents who had visited the village earlier had returned. They were no longer asking questions, they were making demands. With cold efficiency, they claimed ownership of the findings, citing governmental authority over any research that could potentially change the course of human life. The researchers, now understanding the gravity of what they had uncovered, knew they could no longer trust anyone, especially not the outsiders who had started to move in. One of the researchers, Dr. Patel, suggested they destroy the book, the herbs, and everything related to Georgie's knowledge. It was the only way to prevent the secret from falling into the wrong hands. But when they returned to Georgie's house to carry out their plan, they found that the chest had disappeared. The room, which had once been filled with the faint smell of dried herbs and old wood, was now empty, except for one final note, written in a hand they all recognized. Georgie's. The note was simple, but its meaning was chilling. You were never meant to find this. The time of the secret has passed. Now it is yours to keep or to destroy, but the choice will come at a price. The mountain has been disturbed, and with it, the balance of the world. It was the last warning. The researchers did not destroy the book, but they also did not share it with the world. The government agents, sensing something was amiss, left with only half of the information they had sought. The remaining researchers fled Vashlavani, some returning to their homes, others disappearing without a trace, unable to cope with the knowledge they had gained. Years passed, and the village slowly faded from memory. Its name was erased from all maps, and anyone who had lived there moved on, eventually forgetting the secrets that had once kept them young. Yet the world still buzzed with whispers, rumors of a place where the air was pure, the waters ran clean, and the people lived to be over a century old. As for the book and the herbs, they vanished, hidden away in the folds of history, their true power locked in a secret that might never be fully understood. But deep in the archives of a forgotten lab, in a dusty file marked Project Ceratelli, the note still lies. And with it, the final question. What happens when immortality is not a gift, but a curse?